Day, and he is.
I am Aaron Tomlinson.
Yes, you are. And it's good to see you, man. I hope you had a good week.
I did.
Uh, Mine was a roller coaster. It went from good to good to shitty, and it ended good.
Well, at least you ended on a high note.
Yeah, and I think that going into the holidays, I think we're going to be kind of slowing down at work. So the potential for shittiness is going to be greatly diminished, and I'm very happy about that. So with that being said, man, what is in the glass today?
So I'm just drinking a Merlot tonight, a healthy portion, but yeah.
Okay,
What about
well,
you?
I'm having some fucking bourbon. This is actually short for Four Kings, Not Gods.
Ah,
It's a brand out of Detroit, and
okay.
my son bought this for me as an early Christmas gift.
All
So
right.
as you can see, I'm wearing it's like actually it's a pajama top, right? But it
Okay.
says "Merry Rickmas" in deference to Rick and
Rick
Morty.
and Morty. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be going to an ugly sweater party tonight, and gonna see some friends and have some drinks and eat some food and all of that stuff. So I'm excited about that.
Good.
So with that being said, are you going to introduce the
Yeah,
topic or shall
I'll set it up because
I? Okay.
I think this topic came about from a little bit of backstory of some stuff that I posted on social media. So I put up a post that were similar. I put up two posts that were similar. I put up one about semantics and how sometimes this is general. I'm not talking about you and me or anybody specifically, but just generally speaking, we can misunderstand each other. We can even be saying the same exact thing, basically. We're just using different language to
Yeah.
say the same thing. But because we're using different language, there's potential for misunderstanding. And so that we get into arguments with people and whatever, when in fact we're totally misunderstanding, or we're even saying the same thing just because we're using different language to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Using different words that mean different things. So I talked about the sort of the slipperiness of language
Yeah.
in that post. And then I put up another post, and this was really geared towards the spiritual community specifically, where I talked about having an element of humility when we're talking about these things.
Yeah.
And both posts related, because when you're talking about spiritual stuff, you're using language that can easily be misunderstood because not everybody has the same level of understanding or thinking or experience, and these are very, very abstract concepts.
Hmm.
In other words, if we're talking about wine, if we went to a wine tasting event or something and they were talking about wine pairings and things like that, we can all drink the wine. We know what we're talking about. It's very concrete, right? You have a glass of red wine, you have a glass of white wine. Everybody agrees on that. You're kind of talking about the same thing.
Yep.
You talk about the, flavor pairings, and you can try them and you can share your thoughts and ideas. But there's a baseline level of experience, shared experience and shared language that makes those kinds of conversations easier to have. When you start talking about spiritual stuff, you start getting into subjective experiences, people's subjective ideas, and you're talking about very abstract concepts. So, for example, even the term spirituality can mean different things to different people. This isn't much different than when we were in religion and people would talk about the difference between religion and relationship and that kind of thing. Even those terms are somewhat abstract. But when you leave religion, you start talking about spirituality, it becomes even more abstract. And
Hmm.
I've been thinking about this for a while because I have a friend who's doing research for a book that she may or may not write about cults. And cults, for whatever reason, have kind of hit pop culture at the moment. I mean, I've heard it being talked about just this week on one of the talk radio stations from Denver that I listen to. And just thinking about, if you're in a cult, you're elevating someone else and their knowledge above everything else. They're the authority, they're the leader, they're the law, right?
Yep.
So I put this post out on in the New Date Global Group, and I think on my personal page, specifically regarding spiritual conversations, that we need to have a dose of humility and not come across like we know it all, not come across with this
Yeah.
air of superiority. Because if you're coming across, if that spirit of superiority is there, then the polar opposite of there is there also, which is a spirit of inferiority, right?
Hmm.
And one person has the truth, one person has the next level of consciousness, or they have the right and the authority to speak against specific people or specific group, and they come across, they don't just come across, they really genuinely believe they know it all.
Yeah.
And then they meet inferiority, people who are new at this stuff, or people who are just exploring it, people who generally have insecurities in themselves, or don't have the knowledge base or experience in these things. Then that's a dangerous combination, right?
Yeah.
That could generate a cult. So I thought it was pertinent to talk about. I had somebody message me about, how some people are so into their Gnosticism, their own personal experiences of the metaphysical or of God or whatever, that they think they've outgrown and become superior to everybody else. And so this all kind of converged. I'm saying this to say this all kind of converged
Yep.
into my thinking, right? And so then we were talking about these topics, you and I, during the week. And so, yeah, we just decided it would be a good idea to share the difference between knowledge and know it all. And so I'll give you my that's the context for it. I'll give you my preliminary thoughts on it, and then open up the discussion to you.
Okay.
But we all, I mean, let's be honest, we all can at times overstate our knowledge on a particular topic. We can all speak out of turn. We can all exaggerate a little bit what we know. We fill in the gaps while we're talking. Sometimes what we fill in is accurate. Sometimes what we don't fill in terms of our lack of knowledge is not accurate. We all do that. That's just human nature. But a know-it-all really has their identity and their persona wrapped up in their knowledge.
Yeah.
And they leverage their self-esteem or use impressing people with their knowledge as a form of social currency, which is really not aimed at building better relationships. It's aimed at making them feel better than other people, because that's where they draw their sense of self. And so it's a consistent thing. It's not just I misspoke or I overspoke or I said something that wasn't quite right. Like those things are flexible, you adjust. But when somebody's sense of self is crystallized, harmonized, concretized with their knowledge on a subject, they don't have that kind of flexibility. They're very rigid in the way that they present, the way they talk to people, the way they interact and have exchanges with people, right? So I'll use myself as an example. Now, to come to knowledge or expertise. Now, expertise is on a spectrum.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily become an identity in and of itself. It doesn't become a part of a person's sense of self. It's just a resource that they have that they share with people. So, for example, I have master's level formal training in clinical mental health counseling. So if I'm talking to a group of lay people about those topics, then I'm the expert in the room, right? Yeah. And people pay me, I'm a professional. They wouldn't come to me if I didn't have any expertise.
Right.
So in the counseling sessions or whatever, I'm the expert on mental health, or the people wouldn't come, they wouldn't pay me, right? But at the same time, I have to take continuing education credits to keep my license, and I like to do that. Yep. If I'm in a continuing education class, I'm no longer the expert. You see what I'm saying? How it's on a spectrum, I'm no longer the expert. The person presenting the information is the expert in that situation. And they aren't even an expert compared to, say, a world-renowned expert or one of the top 5 experts in the world on a particular topic. So it's a sliding scale. Yep. And that's one of the ways that you can tell. So one of the marks of just knowledge versus know-it-all is you understand it's on a spectrum, and you understand when you're the expert in the room on a topic and when you're not the expert in the room. You're not, we'll see how do I say this. Let me say it this way, because this will be clearer. You understand your level of expertise relative to the people that you're talking to.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that again, just because I want to be clear. You understand your level of expertise relative to the people that you're talking to, but the know-it-all is the expert.
Right.
And that's how I would set that up as the difference.
And that is a fantastic setup because I've been accused of being a know-it-all. And and I think that one of the big problems about knowledge, especially when you exercise that you know something, that it can easily be misconstrued, especially if you are trying to use your knowledge or your subject matter expertise as as a tool to refute something else,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a know-it-all. It just says that, like for example, using you as an example, you're a licensed clinical counselor.
Mm-hmm.
You have master's level training on that. Now, you and I both have been pastors. And so in that capacity, we counsel people.
Right.
But the level of counseling that I've done is not in the same universe as yours, right? So I can say to someone, well, I've counseled many people on thus and such,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never done it in a licensed, professional, compensated position.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that people need to understand is that, like, when someone says that they understand something, like for example, me, I work with enterprise resource planning, data analytics,
Yep.
artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth, right? And to people that don't have any experience in that, I would be the expert in the room.
Right.
But I'll pick on my work BFF, who is, just probably the most knowledgeable guy I know on in what I do. So when I'm talking to a customer and he and I are both on the call or in the room, if I say something and he says something, I immediately shrink and give
Right.
him the space because I understand that for all that I know, I don't know what he knows. And this is the difference, as you so eloquently put it, between a knowledgeable person or SME, a subject matter expert, and a know it all. Because the know it all just simply says, okay, because I've done this, or because I've experienced this, or because I've seen this, my knowledge is superior. And this is the other thing about the subject matter expert understands, like how you were talking about continuing education for licensing purposes. That is a hallmark of professional humility
Mm-hmm.
because you're saying I'm submitting myself to the process that I don't have all the answers and that I have to subject myself to a refresher of training to maintain my certifications. Now, and I'm the same way. I have certifications in what I do. But I also understand that if, like, let me give you an example, another example. Like, I work with different what they call hyperscalers, Google Cloud, AWS, and Microsoft Azure. I'm pretty solid on Google. So when I'm talking to someone about AWS or Azure, if someone's in the room that has that knowledge, I'm going to defer to them. Or if I'm a partner working with these companies. If someone from those companies is doing the talking, I shrink. I shrink back
Right.
because I understand that they represent that they are essentially the fountainhead of that knowledge. So one of the things that I think that we all need to do is give ourselves a checkup from the neck up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And say, okay, I know this, but am I the final authority on this? Now, I'm going to kick this back to religion for a minute
Mm-hmm.
because there are 42,000 known Christian denominations, okay? And every one of those Christian denominations think that they have the right interpretation of scripture. Now, here's the funny part is that within each one of those 42,000 denominations, you probably have about 42,000 people, 42,000 individuals who think that they have some special revelation that makes their knowledge superior. So watch this. When you know something and you weaponize it
Yeah, there you go.
and
That's the key
use
right
it to oppress, to subjugate, or
there.
to render inferior, as you said, others because you don't know what I know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
then you become a know-it-all. And that's so I have been on record in dealing with a lot of preachers, pastors, apostles, bishops, whatever. And I ask them this one pointed question: are you the ultimate arbiter and authority on this matter? Because if you are, then we need to bow down to you. And I say that facetiously because nobody should bow down to anybody because nobody is the ultimate arbiter or authority on any fucking thing,
Right.
right? So I say all this to say that you know it's good to know, but it's not good to use what you know as a lever to try to express your superiority over anyone.
Yep.
That's my take.
Well, I love what you said about weaponizing. I think that's really key. I think that's really key. And recognizing when people are weaponizing information to leverage it against you. Um, which ultimately devolves into ad hominem attacks. So for people that don't know what an ad hominem attack is, it's when you are discussing a topic with someone
Mhm.
and you think that I suppose people that use ad hominem attacks, the holes in their argument are being exposed
Yep.
and they don't actually know as much as they think they do, or they would be able to counter that without going to a personal attack. So ad hominem is now I'm going to make it about your character. Now I'm going to make it about something in you that is a flaw because I'm uncomfortable with this conversation that we're having. And so I think that's so important, man. Such a good insight about weaponizing information against somebody.
Yep.
Or weaponize it like so for example, and again I'm going to bring this back to the context of spirituality as separate from religion, because religion pretty much thrives on the know-it-all complex, as you
Yes.
pointed out. Whereas spirituality is a broader category. It could include Christian mystics, it could include Sufi Muslims, it could include New Agers, it could include people who just have some sort of a transcendent sense of self or meaning or purpose, right? I mean, there's many different ways, many different expressions. It's a very broad category, very many different expressions of that. But again, it's very, very subjective. And so people can use their experiences or their knowledge and they can weaponize it against other people. And they're weaponizing it because it becomes about good and evil in their mind. The conversation shifts from a sharing of ideas to I'm on the side of good and you're on the side of evil, and you just don't know you're on the side of evil. But if you'll listen to me long enough, then you'll find out you're on the side of evil and you'll repent. You'll be just like me, and life is good. It's actually a scapegoating mechanism.
Mhm.
And so what can happen to a lot of people, and this another post, in that post that I put up about superiority, I talked about the spirit of competition. And
Yeah.
Rene Girard, who was an anthropologist who did his life work on the scapegoating mechanism within human societies. He says the basis, excuse me, for a scapegoating mechanism is jealousy over by comparing what you have to what someone else has, right? And you become jealous of that jealousy, that lack of that frustration, that underlying frustration of not being successful or not having enough stuff or not having enough followers. um that religion, who has some more followers, who has some more converts, social media, who has some more followers, who has some more converts, it's the same thing, right?
Mhm.
And it's dangerous when you mix the two.
Very.
It's combustible. But and so when that happens, then you have to find a scapegoat. You that frustration has to go somewhere. And so according to Rene Girard, in the scapegoating mechanism, you have to vilify other people, and probably specifically other people that have something that you're jealous of. So you have to make them a villain. You just don't have as many followers because you're speaking truth and people can't handle the truth. And so I'm going to vilify other people or other systems or thought streams, in order to, again, be the know-it-all, improve myself. It all comes out of insecurity. It's all rooted in
It absolutely
insecurity
is.
and in insufficient sense of self. Now, what I do to distinguish a little bit, I have a lot of spiritual experiences, right?
Yep.
I don't talk about them a lot because I don't want to elevate those, because I realize there are a lot of people that don't have those experiences. And so I don't want to leverage those experiences or cause in any way for other people who have not had those experiences to feel less than, or I don't want to stand on a soapbox and say, well, I'm right because here's my history, right?
Mhm.
And so the way I try to approach things when I'm talking about it is I try to bring in the intellectual side as well, and hold it with humility. Look, these are my subjective experiences. Just because they're my subjective experiences doesn't mean anything other than this is what's true for me. This is what's true in my personal history and my
Mhm.
life. Now, in trying to make sense of that for myself, I want to be balanced, right? So you could use the right hemisphere, left hemisphere brain analogy. Right hemisphere brain having those subjective spiritual experiences, and left hemisphere, let's look at logic and reason and rationale and verifiable, if not empirically verifiable in the traditional scientific sense, at least uh, there's a rich enough there's enough people that have shared these same type of experiences
Yeah.
that we can compare them and patterns can begin to emerge. And then out of those patterns, we can apply the scientific method
Yep.
or the left brain method. And then if we can harmonize those two, great. But you're always on a quest. Uh, you're always open. You're always learning. You're holding on tightly with an open hand, so to speak.
Yep.
And but the one thing you're not doing, the one thing you're definitely not doing. I mean, if you jump on here for this 30-second diatribe, I'm going to go on, and this is the only thing you get because you log off. Um, Watch out for people that weaponize their knowledge. Watch out for people that are using very intense, emotionally driven language against other people to
Mhm.
try to validate themselves and prove their points, because that's a very dangerous person that you're dealing with.
Yes.
So there you go. Great point you made about weaponizing the information.
Well, and this is the thing about weaponizing is, um, again, what people are trying to do, they're trying to secure some high ground. It's almost like in a very military sense where you're trying to seize the intellectual high ground, the moral high ground, the spiritual high ground, and position yourself as this, essentially you're an ivory tower
Yeah.
in and of yourself. And so here's the thing about this, right? I don't have a problem with a guru who comes to their guru-ness organically,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is why people like Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and Les Brown, um, how they come to their position. I don't think that they're actually, I mean, yes, they are marketing, right? But they're not trying to establish themselves as the ultimate authority on anything. And one of the things that you'll see is that these gurus, the John Maxwell's and so on and so forth, that over time, Bob Proctor, basically, what they're doing is they're speaking their knowledge, but they're also embracing new knowledge.
Right.
And they're constantly adapting and constantly changing. And that to me is the difference between someone who is knowledgeable and someone who's a know-it-all. So to back to your point, that the know-it-all galvanizes in what they know. It's static. It's concretized. I like that word that you used. It's set in stark relief to whatever else it competes with. And what I think is that the knowledge, and you and I, we've talked about this before, that knowledge is an essential component of growth.
Yes.
That if you're alive, you're growing. You should be, right? That you're what you know today should be, it should pale in comparison to what you know tomorrow.
Hmm.
And one of the things that frustrates me, and I've seen you get it. I've seen it. I've actually seen it in social media, and I get it the same way. Aaron, you're closed-minded. You harden yourself to truth,
Hmm. But
and I
let me
get
let me
that
just
too.
let me just interject. That's weaponizing.
It
That's
is.
coming at
That's
your
exactly
character. You're
weaponizing.
closed-minded. You're hardened to the truth. You're bitter. It's not. We're not. It's ad hominem. But anyway, I'm sorry if
Yeah.
I stole your thunder there,
No,
dude.
no, no. That's fine. Uh, that and what I try to explain to people is that for people like you and I who we've been ministers of Jesus Christ,
Hmm.
preachers of the gospel, right?
Hmm.
And so now we're in different headspaces.
Right.
Okay, in order for us to get here, this required some significant open-mindedness, because either one of us, because we've had significant followings, because we had significant titles, because we had accomplished things, and we were proven known quantities, it would be easy to say, well, I don't need to learn this because I already know that.
Hmm.
And, but key to our evolution is the fact that we've maintained some plasticity,
Hmm.
elasticity, and agility in our thinking.
Hmm.
And so what happens is that the know-it-all loses all of that. The know-it-all has no elasticity, has no plasticity, has no agility. They are rigid as rigor mortis
Yeah.
when it comes to their thinking. And I'm using that term very consciously because rigor mortis is evidence of death.
Mm. Wow.
So when you have become galvanized in your thinking, you have become intellectually or mentally or spiritually dead.
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing about this, right? That no person can pronounce themselves dead. that in order for proof of death requires an assertion uh, that's not the right word, ascertaining of death, right? So that means that a physician or someone of that ilk has to pronounce a body dead, to speak death over this body. Here's the funny thing about this, right? Is that the person, when you're dead, it's like being stupid. It's like you everybody else knows that you're dead, just like everyone else knows that you're stupid. You just don't realize it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
And
that's so true.
and I don't mean to say that a know-it-all is stupid, because that's not necessarily the case. Because sometimes a know-it-all can be a highly intellectual person.
Usually they are, or they
They
wouldn't
are.
have said that. Yeah, for sure.
But again, here's the thing: like when you rely on your knowledge at the expense of any additional mitigating or edifying data. I mean, so if you're knowledgeable, I mean, there are people who know things, right? I I I have friends who are physicians. I have friends who are morticians. I have friends who are attorneys, and they know what they know. But the best of them all, you said, you used a term, and I love this, holding on to something loosely. Watch
Mhm.
this. I'm going to give an analogy, and I love this. Have you ever like swung across monkey bars?
Yeah, it's great. Great analogy.
That in order for you to move forward on the monkey bars, you have to let go of the bar that you're on to get to the next one. And it's a constant process of grasping and releasing. If you galvanize at any point, now you're going to suspend your body weight in a static position. And just like on the monkey bars, you will fall because you can't sustain your body weight with your hands indefinitely. The know it all is also going to fall because they cannot hold their position. Their position is not indefinitely tenable. And that's the thing. When and I have to check myself, Aaron, on a regular basis. Because first of all, let me say this: I'm on the record as saying humility is overrated. Yes,
Yeah.
you should have some measure of humility, but I don't. Most people think they fall in this trap of false humility and and self deprecation, and I think that that's bullshit. But if you at some point you have to have enough humility to recognize I don't know it all. I don't care what the subject is. I'm an IT consultant. I make a lot of money doing what I do. But I know that when I'm in the room with someone who knows more than me, I shut up.
Hmm.
I shut up. And this is the other thing too. I put myself in the posture to receive.
Hmm.
I put myself in a posture of learning, because that is how you grow.
Hmm.
You might know something, but in order for you to progress and to learn the next thing, you're going to have to open your mind, open your hands, right? Set yourself in the posture of learning to receive this new information. Anyway,
Yeah.
time for a drink.
Humility's, this is a great example of what I started this conversation with. Um, Humility, nobody ever fell over a pile of humility. Use it as a noun, but nobody ever touched it. Nobody ever drove, unless there's a humility Texas. It seems like Texas has a town for everything. There's
Yeah.
there's Palestine, Texas. There's whatever.
Humble,
Um,
Texas.
Humble, Texas. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Right outside of Houston there. Um, but that's exactly the kind of term I'm talking about. Like, I can't take humility home in a bucket and examine it. You know what I mean? Because we're talking about, what are we talking about when we talk about humility? Well, it depends on how you define the term. It depends on your experience with humility. And, in the church, humility did, I don't know, devolve into self-deprecation and self-loathing and not owning your strengths, or, so the person sings a great powerful song in service, and you go up to them and say, man, that was really awesome. I used to do this to people all the time, Derrick. I'd walk up to them, man, that was so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And they would invariably, 9 out of 10 of them would say, oh, well, that's just the Lord.
Yep.
I would reply to them and say, well, if that was just the Lord, then I guess you didn't have to get up and come to church this morning.
Yeah. The Lord could have sang that.
Kind of look at me like, what the hell? So, most people, I think, define pride with, it's the same kind of slippery term, right?
Mhm.
And so they'll define pride with confidence, or they'll equate the thing, pride with confidence, or they'll equate pride with feeling good about yourself. And so that will prevent them from making growth in their self-esteem, growth in their sense of what we call in psychology self-efficacy, which is just an academic way of saying confidence. And so for me, those terms are completely, they don't mean that anymore. Like, for me, humility just means I have some self-awareness, and I'm authentic and genuine in that self-awareness.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to cover over with something. So in other words, a person who lacks humility is overestimating who they know themselves to be authentically within themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that would be pride. So humility to me is like, hey, we're all doing the best we can with what we have at the time, right?
Yep.
And if I have an area of knowledge, and particularly in my field, because I'm a counselor, if I have an area of knowledge, I'm there to serve you and help you with that knowledge. I'm there to lift you up with that knowledge. I'm there to help you improve your life,
Yeah.
So it's a tool towards your promotion, and I'm holding you with unconditional positive regard, rather than, well, why are you going to go out and do that? I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
if somebody comes to you for counseling, people think counseling is you give people advice. That's not it at all. The idea is to help them explore themselves and arrive at their own conclusions. And the goal is to keep your own value judgments and morality and personal beliefs out of the conversation as much as possible, and only offer advice as it relates to the problem that the person is struggling with. So, for example, if someone comes to me with anxiety and they're in a I'm trying to think of one that hasn't been recent, so nobody that watches this thinks I'm talking about them. They're in a throuple. There's this whole new redefining of relationships, and so there could be, like, let's just say two bisexual women and a man, and they're all relating to each other, and they're a throuple, and the person is anxious all the time and jealous all the time. It's not my place to say, well, maybe you should get out of that. It's my place to say, how can we look at this in light of clinical information about anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
How can we look at this in light of clinical information about jealousy, and share that with them and let them make their own conclusions? Because at the end of the day, Derrick, you have to live in your skin, man. You have to live with the choices that you make. I have to live with the choices that I make. The very last thing that I want to do, the very last thing I want to do is come from my frame of reference and give someone advice and have them take that advice against their own sense of self and be miserable because of it.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm rambling, but
Oh, dude, you're on a roll. Keep going.
Tommy somewhere in here, Tommy Stewart somewhere in here said, closed-minded usually just means I'm just upset that you don't find my heart. I'm sorry. I'm just upset that you don't find my arguments convincing. but again,
Let me
you don't
interject
have
something
to.
here.
You don't have.
Let me say something here,
Yeah, go ahead.
because here's the deal between the knowledgeable person and the know-it-all, right? And this is my maxim. I honestly don't care what you think about what I say. How you process it, whether you embrace it, internalize it, reject it, block it, I don't care. What I do care about is that you think. I don't care what you think about what I say. I only care that you think, because this is and this is the difference, I think, the fundamental difference between the knowledgeable person, the SME, and the know-it-all, is that the knowledgeable person is all about helping people find the answer themselves. The know-it-all wants to be the source of the answer, and that they by
Such good.
themselves
So
hold
good.
the answer.
So good.
And so I always tell people, like, because people say that, like, I'll post something on social media and they'll say, well, you don't want anybody telling you what to think, but you're out here telling people what to think. I'm like, no, I'm not telling people what to think. I honestly, and let me just say this very succinctly to everybody who's watching, I honestly don't give a fuck about what you think about what I think, about my thoughts. I have my opinions, and everybody has their opinion. And I really give less than two shits about what you think about my opinion. But if I said something to make you think about what your position is,
Right.
where you're how you're coming to this, how you're approaching this, how you're processing this, then hey, mission accomplished, right? But for me to try to impress upon you, I'm not trying to make proselytes. I'm not trying to make converts.
Right.
I couldn't care less about what you think about what I think, but I do care deeply that you think.
Well, yeah, and I think, in observing you and relating to you for however many years now, and going back before we were doing this, watching you on social media, I've never seen you. Now, that's not to say you haven't, and but this is not your pattern for sure. I've never seen you just go at somebody about anything. You'll go at a philosophy, like so for like religion or
Yeah,
promoting atheism, right? You're going against a philosophy, let's say, for lack of a better word, a way of thinking and being in the world
yeah,
that you genuinely believe does a lot of harm to people.
yeah.
You're never going after, I've never seen you take off after an individual,
Nope,
not even indirectly.
nope.
Now, I have seen you go at individuals who went at you,
Oh yeah,
and that's a different thing. That's a totally different thing. So, I mean, this is a crazy thing, right? Like, so two people are on a street. One person walks up and throws a sucker punch at the other person and hits him right across the jaw
yeah,
and makes them react. And they react in self-defense, but they end up kicking that person's ass.
yeah.
And then that person goes on social media and acts like the person they hit is the bully.
Right. Perfect analogy. Perfect.
And it, yeah, because in social media, like, I mean, that, yeah. So, ugh. I mean, I get it. I get it. Like, because you and I, we have very strong opinions when it comes to certain religious topics, right? And we both see the futility of it, the harm in it, the silliness of it, whatever.
Hmm.
And so we can post something about that but it's focused generally on the ideology to do exactly what you said, to make people think. We don't then follow it up by getting offended because people push back, as long as they do it respectfully, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not about it's about the exchange of ideas. And this is, I guess this is why, one of the reasons I liked this topic is one of the things that really bothers me about and concerns me and worries me about the culture in which we live. We talked about this a few weeks ago, is there's no dialogue, but dialogue requires that human connection, right? Like,
Yep.
and that human connection requires mutual respect.
Yep.
And mutual respect means sometimes you don't say everything that you're thinking.
Right.
You don't go unfiltered on people. You certainly don't weaponize things against people, or you don't weaponize. You don't take a strike at somebody intellectually, and then they strike back, and you say, "Oh, they're the bully. Look at how they're treating
Yep.
me. I didn't do anything. I was." I mean, it's crazy, but for me, like, I value that human connection, right? I value the human experience. I want to hear, one of the reasons that I love what I do is I get the chance to hear people's stories and experience life through their shoes, right?
Yep.
And I never want to lose that. I never want to lose that sense. And know it all, they never even got that to begin with. They never
Yep.
even had that. And I'll tell you one other thing that's been on my mind. I want to get it out before we're done. But did you ever preach? I don't know if you ever did this, but preach and then do like a question and answer period,
Yeah. Yep.
a follow-up period,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
I used to do that a lot. In fact, there was a season where I would preach a message on Sunday, and then for Wednesday night service, anybody that wanted to come, rather than just preaching another message, having another service that was just like Sunday,
Yep.
I would do a question and answer based on what I talked about. I do it on Monday nights. Now, I don't get a lot of people that are following or asking questions, but here's the thing. I always wanted to make sure that I was brushed up on the topic. I mean, that was a little bit of a scary topic. Like, what question am I going to get asked?
Hmm.
And I always wanted to approach it, and this is where I would say from genuine humility, which is, I'm using my knowledge to help you think,
Right.
not to persuade you to think like me. Even back when I was in church, maybe more so because, we have those religious frames, whatever. But
Yep.
it was never, oh shit, I don't want anybody to ask a question that I don't know the answer to because I might look foolish.
Yeah.
And then try to turn it on them or bully them from the pulpit. I hate that kind of stuff. I've always hated that kind of stuff. But lastly, I'm going to say this. When it comes to religious topics and sometimes political topics, so you can look at this idea. Somebody walks up on the street, they punch you in the face, and you fight back, and then they play the victim. That can happen in interpersonal conversations. I insult you. I go to ad hominem attacks against you, and you defend yourself, with aggression, and all of a sudden you're the one that's being aggressive. You're the one that has the problem, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to play the victim.
Mm-hmm.
But it also happens, like religion, to a large degree, is punching people in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, taking away women's reproductive rights is punching women in the face.
Yep.
Telling someone that they're a dirty, rotten sinner and that they're going to hell is punching people in the face. I mean, even Jesus, we want to come back and say, okay, even Jesus, like most of Christian America needs to take a Jesus ethics class or something, because even
Yeah.
Jesus said, if you see the speck in your brother's eye, but you don't see the plank in your own eye, he says, get the plank out of your own eye and then remove the speck. But they're not even, like, removing a speck from someone's eye is a very delicate process.
Yes, it is.
Right? Because that's a very vulnerable area. So if you're going to come in and talk to somebody about a character flaw that they have or something like that, or something that they're not seeing, since we're talking about knowledge, something that they're not seeing, you've got to do that with elegance. You've got to do that with gentleness. You've got to do that with respect for what you're doing in that other person's life. I think what Jesus is saying there is you don't just walk up to somebody and poke them in the eye trying to get the speck out of their eye.
Right.
Because chances are, if you do that, what you're really doing is seeing the plank in your own eye. You're seeing the character flaw in your own eye, and you're trying so hard to get the plank out of your own eye, but you don't realize, because if you think about it, if I have a plank in my own eye, anything that comes in, what am I seeing? I'm
Yeah.
only seeing the plank. So when I'm interacting with you, I only see what's unconsciously in me that I haven't addressed or dealt with yet. And so then, therefore, I'm raging back at you against what's really in me because I can't see you at all.
Yeah.
I cannot speak to you about any flaw in your life because every flaw I see is a projection of the flaws in my own life that I haven't dealt with.
Man, dude, that that is a whole sermon in and of itself, right?
Yeah, kind of
Because
is, isn't it?
if you think about this, right, when you're going, there was a term, an old preacher had taught this to me. He called it moat hunting. You know, when you're moat hunting, you're looking for those specks in other people's eyes, but you're blinded by the plank in your own eye. And that's another problem with the know-it-all is that the know-it-all lacks empathy, lacks
Absolutely.
compassion,
Yep.
and most of all lacks nuance.
Yep.
So now they're coming at you looking for a flaw in you, right? To try to point out a flaw in you, to try to to make some correction in you. But as you so eloquently pointed out, it's really a projection of their own flaws. And let me say this. I can't say this enough. I did a master class on self. And I really keep going back to this because if you don't really have a good working knowledge of yourself, if you don't have a good understanding of yourself, and then on top of that, if you don't exercise some self love, that is having empathy and compassion for yourself, if you can't muster that for yourself, you cannot muster it for anyone else. And so if you're going to beat yourself down, guess what you're going to do? You're going to beat other people down.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
what you're going to do. If you are self-punishing,
Mhm.
self-flagellating, this is what you seek to do to others. And what happens is that, and I think that and again, personally I don't have a lot of use for the Bible, right?
Right.
But a broken clock is right twice a day. and, and so when it says that knowledge puffs up,
Yep.
there is some truth to that.
Mhm.
Because if you have knowledge without understanding, basically wisdom is knowledge plus understanding. That's wisdom. But if you have knowledge with without understanding, what you have is educated foolishness, educated ignorance. And that, so when we talk about the difference between knowing and know-it-alls, this is the thing. For everybody that's watching, I always tell people, I said introspection is both a gift and a learned skill. At some point, you must examine yourself and take a look at yourself and say, okay, am I so? And this was another thing I used to teach when I was preaching, that the need to be right often exceeds the need to be loved, not loved, but love.
Absolutely.
And so what happens is the know-it-all is concerned about expressing their knowledge at the expense of loving others.
I love that. I love that because I'm thinking about this in interpersonal relationships, right? Because, and what I mean is like, friends, family, partners, whatever that you may have in your life. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. Relationships are complex and difficult. And
Mhm.
if there's enough, I mean, they're so complex. I hate to talk about them because every situation is different, but we'll weaponize things against people in our personal life. We just will.
Yep.
That's sometimes what an argument is, right? I mean, one of the things we do in relationship counseling, and I'll be the first to admit that I don't practice this perfectly. Um, but there should be rules of engagement. There should be a preset ahead of time. These are the rules of engagement when we get into
Mhm.
conflict, because our tendency is going to be to weaponize against one another, right? And so we try to encourage couples to, come up with rules of engagement. Like early on with my wife and I, like, we're not going on any archaeological excavations. Like,
Yeah.
we're not bringing up something from 10 years ago or whatever the case may be. But we had a certain set of rules of engagement that we both agreed on. Now, have we followed those perfectly? Absolutely not. But it gives us a little bit of a baseline, right?
Yep.
So here's the flip side of being a know-it-all. People can weaponize this concept. Well, you just think you know everything. You just think you've got it all figured out.
Ah.
You just don't want to listen to anybody. Well, now what I'm doing is I'm taking the very thing that you and I are talking about and I'm projecting it and I'm weaponizing it
Yeah.
against somebody because I don't like what they're doing or don't like what they're saying. So at the end of the day, really what we're talking about, I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm growing in real time here, I'm processing externally with you. We're talking about control. We're talking about people that want to control your mind, that want to control your thinking, that want to control your behavior. And so if you think about it in the natural, just like I used the example of punching somebody and then playing the victim, what's a great way to control somebody if you walk into a bank? If you want to rob a bank, what are you going to do? You're going to bring a firearm with you or some kind of weapon or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you can put them in fear, show your strength, even though your strength is a 45 or whatever. But why are you doing that? Because you need control in that situation over that person. So I think we need to be aware that what the know-it-all is doing, this goes back to the very first thing you said, Derrick, is they're weaponizing their knowledge in order to subjugate you
Yep.
and to control you and to get you to do what they want you to do, to get you to stop saying what you're saying or to get you to change your mind and come along with the way that I think. It's an issue of control. And so on the flip side of that, people can weaponize, well, you're just a know-it-all. You just think you know everything. Well, you finally figured it out. You've just got it made up. You've already got your mind made up. You're just closed-minded. And I guess what I would want people to understand or get from this, other than don't be dumb and don't be in a cult and don't be an ass. How about that for 3 rules of life? Don't be in a cult, don't be dumb, and don't be an ass.
Those are three good life rules.
but but I guess what I want people to understand is when you feel that, if people are using guilt, if they're using shame, if they're using knowledge, if they're using ad hominem attacks, at the end of the day, what's going on behind all that smokescreen is they got a fire burning inside of them that they have to control you. They have to control your voice, control your influence, control what you're saying, and make you think like them. And then who knows why? I'm sure there's another level as to why they're trying to exert control. But, I've just gotten to the point where I tell clients, that are in relationships like this, if this person is making you feel guilty, why are they making you feel guilty? It's because they want to control or change your behavior in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
They're not willing to accept that this is who you've grown into, that this is who you've become, that this is who you've changed into. And I'm not willing to take on face value that these are now your beliefs. These are now your choices. These are now your values. And so I want to make you feel guilty about your beliefs. I want to make you feel less than about your choices. I want to show you that my values are somehow superior to your values. And we're not talking about topics like, I'm not talking about things like, that are systemically harmful to the collective, like racism and sexism and, some of these things where I think we need to not have tolerance, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about just in interpersonal relationships and yeah. Anyway, okay, I'm done.
No, this is a funny thing. Like the know-it-all in your life is never content with you learning beyond what they think you should know.
Exactly. They want to control it. They want to control your mind.
They want to control your mind. And here's the other thing too. It's not enough to control your mind, because I'm on record as saying this on social media, that if you come on my page, if you're on my page, you're there by invitation,
Hmm.
either explicit or tacit, right?
Right.
And if you come to my page and basically try to put down what I'm saying, or it's tantamount to coming into your house and telling you how you should deal with your family.
Hmm.
Or even worse, it's like coming into your house and taking a shit on your living room floor and then getting upset when you check them on it.
Hmm.
And I'm going to try this. Somebody said that basically arguing with a know it all is like playing chess with a pigeon. That the pigeon is going to knock the pieces over, shit all over the board, and strut around like he won.
Hmm.
And that's really what it is. I let's say let's turn this direction. Let's turn the conversation around for a second, Aaron.
Hmm.
How do we identify the know-it-all?
Oh,
Now,
like that.
now, here's the thing. You would think that at face value, that's a self-answering question. But I don't think that it is, because as we discovered this week, that uh, that the discovery of the know-it-all often doesn't happen until the know-it-all really kind of flips a switch, right?
Mhm.
So how do we identify the know-it-all, and how do we protect ourselves, defend ourselves against the wiles or the tactics
Yeah.
of the
So, so,
know-it-all?
so one of the things I want to say is, one of the things that I've seen, and this probably hasn't hit your radar orbit at all, because you don't generally talk about overtly spiritual stuff as much as I do. But one of the things that is popular in whatever circles I've managed to, well, I'm not sure the geometric term right now, but wherever my circle overlaps with someone else's circle.
Like a Venn
Um,
diagram.
yeah. Thank you. Um, People have quit saying understanding. And I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but there is a whole group out there that you'll see them right. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And because they take this so literally that the word understand means that I stand under you. So therefore, I'm making you somehow more than me, and somehow that gives you some kind of an authority over me. Now, I'm
Mhm.
going somewhere with this. I think that's completely. I, dude, I can't take no offense to anybody. If you're out there, please don't get offended. I just personally find that very humorous for myself,
It
because
is.
just
It's
because,
it's very condescending.
yeah, well, and just it's so standing under means that I am getting outside of myself. It's the exact opposite of understanding. If I want to understand you, Derrick, if you and I had a conversation, you were going through a difficult time, let's just say that. So we take it outside the realm of knowledge for a minute.
Hmm.
And we've done this with each other with knowledge as well. But I really want to stand under you. In other words, I don't want to bring When I'm listening, when I'm seeking to understand, I'm setting myself aside.
Right.
I'm
You're not looking to impress your thinking on my situation.
Exactly. So therefore, I have to stand under you, but that doesn't mean I can't change positions.
Right.
Jesus Christ. I mean, understanding under someone doesn't mean they become your Lord and Savior. It just means that you're willing to step outside of yourself for a minute to stand underneath that person's, to walk in their shoes, to understand where they're coming from. How did you arrive at that conclusion? Why do you think that way? And I'm not arguing, like even topics we've had on atheism and stuff. Help me. I want to stand under you, and this is how I've arrived at these conclusions, and this is what I've done. Most people, when they're having those encounters, they're getting triggered by what you're saying, and they're automatically coming up with their counter argument right away. That's understanding. That's actually understanding. I'm
Yep.
understanding you, and I don't agree with what you say, so I quit listening. I don't really try to be in your shoes for a minute, right?
Right.
I'm crafting my counter argument while you're talking. And to understand is to put that all aside, including your expertise in whatever given area. So
Yep.
I always tell my clients, you're the expert on yourself. I'm the expert in this room on mental health issues, psychology, whatever, state management, whatever you want to call it. But you're the expert on yourself. And there's a million different ways to get to the same place. So if I ever suggest something or, we try a intervention to help you and it doesn't work, then I need you to tell me that didn't work because you're the expert on yourself. You see what I'm saying? So
Yep.
the know-it-all cannot do that at all. They cannot understand. They can only understand. So what I would say is, do you get the feeling from this person that they are laying aside who they are at the moment, holding you with unconditional positive regard, and trying to put themselves in your worldview? Or do you get the sense, in other words, wow, okay, I can see that. That's a really good point. I understand how you got there. That must be very hard for you, or that's really valid, or I can see how you arrived at that conclusion, or do they immediately come right back out with an argument? So that's one thing I would say. If they immediately come out with, and I'm not talking about social media because that's a totally different ballgame, but I'm talking
Yep.
about real life
Real
stuff.
life. Yep.
That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, do they ask you questions? Do they ask you questions, or are they busy? Let's just call it mansplaining. Are they busy mansplaining you, telling you how it is because you're so dumb and you're so dense and you're so dull that you can't get it on your own?
Right.
And so you need me to mansplain you. And I think we can all relate to that. So there's a few things I would say. Do they seek to understand you? And if they do seek to understand you, they're going to listen in a position of standing under you, not
Yep.
understanding. And they're going to ask you questions. So what say you, Derrick Day?
Well, you know what? I like the whole thing you said, that the comparison and contrasting of understanding versus understanding, because understanding is a hallmark of true humility,
Mm-hmm.
because you're saying I'm placing myself, my understanding, my experiences beneath yours, so that I can actually feel the weight
Exactly.
of what it is that you're saying. When
Exactly.
you're saying I'm understanding, you're saying I'm interjecting myself into your situation as a means of influencing the outcome, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I think that that is a really powerful thing, that words matter.
Yep.
And how do people respond? Let me say this, that when I'm dealing with people on social media or in real life, and they say, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said something, I have a question. And and they could frame it a number of different ways. Like they could say, well, I think this, but I have a question, or that doesn't seem right to me, but I have a question. And it doesn't matter as long as you say I have a question, because as long as you say I have a question, that means that there is a possibility for dialogue.
Right.
Several months ago, we did a show on the difference between discourse and dialogue.
Yep.
And if anybody's watching this now, I highly urge you to go back and watch that in light of this particular uh, dialogue, because it's like when you're discussing something, basically you're saying something with the intent of trying to influence an outcome. When you're dialoguing with someone, you're saying, okay, I'm going to try to understand. Okay. And so when we're trying to identify the know-it-all, because let me say this, this is important, this is really important, because nuance here, right? Nuance alert. That when someone, you may not know someone is a know-it-all because of the nuance. In other words, let me just say this, that people, I have to use a street term, a slang term, game. People have game, right?
Mhm.
And so what they'll do is they'll try to sweet talk their weaponized knowledge over you. They'll
Mhm.
they'll they'll, they'll try to soft pedal it to try to make it more palatable, or to make you more receptive to it. And you have to be able to see this, because basically anytime the know-it-all shows up, the know-it-all shows up with the purpose of manipulation or control.
Mhm.
And so when it shows up, even if it's soft pedal, and the reason why I'm saying this is, like, this is pimping 101. For those of you who are not from the streets, this is how pimps make hoes. And you don't want to be the hoe of the know-it-all. You don't want the know-it-all to become your pimp. And
Yeah,
it's easy to happen
it is,
if
Derrick.
you don't know how to read the signs.
Mhm.
So the thing is that when someone tries to uh, take you on an intellectual or emotional roller coaster, in other words, they're taking you up and then they're taking you down,
Yep.
to take you up again, to take you down again.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, just like how on the most successful roller coasters or amusement park rides, they are successful because they disorient you.
Right.
They throw off your perception to where your sense of equilibrium, your
Mhm.
sense of reality is
Come on, man.
distorted, right? So the know-it-all is going to take you on this roller coaster, this intellectual, emotional, spiritual roller coaster, up and down, till you don't know whether you're coming or going. And at that point, the hook is in your mouth. You are made, you are done, right? And now it's just a matter, they're reeling you in, they're playing you, right? You are the object of the bass fishing tournament,
Mhm.
right? Because now you're
Yeah.
on the hook.
Yeah.
And so what you have to do is you have to understand that if someone takes you on an emotional or intellectual high, and then takes you on an emotional or intellectually low, at that first transition, now, okay, I'm going to get into something kind of scientific here, right? The sine wave, right? Up
Mhm.
and down, up
Mhm.
and down, up and down. That is the metaphor, the technical metaphor for life, right? The cardiac rhythm, up and down, up and down, up and down, right? And that. that is a metaphor for life. Flatlining is a metaphor for death. But here's the thing, right? That if these peaks and valleys are sharp and pointed, you can say that you're being manipulated here. And
Mm-hmm.
you just have to learn to identify this. You have to say, okay, have I been taken on an emotional high and then an immediate emotional low? An immediate spiritual high and immediate spiritual low, right? Do you feel your equilibrium has been upset? Do you think that you are not capable of processing this? Do you feel disoriented? Do you feel confused? Because if you feel any of these things, guess what? You are under the influence
Mm-hmm.
of the know-it-all.
Mm-hmm.
The know-it-all is now moving you like a chess piece, moving you like an angler moves a fish.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have to do is you have to understand, okay, if this is the case, I'm now in the presence of a know-it-all. Now I understand this, right? Because one of the things that, like, to use the fishing analogy, fishermen use different lures and different bait. Why? Because the fish become acclimatized to a certain bait or a certain lure, and they
Yep.
will learn to ignore it because they'll say, hey, that represents danger.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to do is you have to learn how to, and again, this is where mental agility, mental plasticity, spiritual flexibility, spiritual plasticity, where all of this comes in, because once you understand, okay, you used a word earlier on the spectrum, right? Because these things happen on a like a rheostat type of scale, like a dimmer switch. It's not all the way on or off. It could be any one of an infinite number of positions on this spectrum. But if you learn to identify it, then you can say, okay, I'm in the presence of a know-it-all. I know that I'm not going to be taken by this. So now I start asking them questions to nuance it. And this is how you defeat the know-it-all, right? The know-it-all is defeated entirely by questions.
Absolutely. 100%.
Because when you fail to ask questions, the know-it-all says, I've got you. I've got you. I hook, line, and sinker, you're
Yep.
done. Stick a
Yep.
fork in you, you're done. The timer thing, like on a turkey, pops up, you're done.
Yep.
If you are sentient enough to say, okay, I don't know about that. Well, what do you think about this? Or how about this? Or have you considered this? At that point, now watch this. This is how you're going to know that you've encountered the know-it-all. Because if you encounter the knowledgeable person is going to answer your questions compassionately.
Yep.
The know-it-all is going to immediately fight back. Well, you don't know what I know. You haven't seen what I've seen. You don't have
Exactly.
my experience. You
Exactly.
don't you're not smart enough.
Yep.
And that's where I'll kick it back to you, man.
Well, the other thing they'll do, if they even do that, is, I think that's great. A great criteria. Do you want to know? Ask a question and then pay attention to the response.
Yep.
Because sometimes they'll completely avoid the question. Sometimes they won't engage the question at all. Sometimes they'll change the frame of the discussion. And they'll do this by comparison. So what I mean by this is, well, this is just like, and they'll bring up something that has nothing to do with the question that you asked. For instance, I had someone this week who had a bad experience with, I don't know, I guess Joe Dispenza or, the world of positive thinking or whatever. And I sounded to that person like I was propagating that, which I
Mhm.
don't think, propagating positive thinking, I don't think is a bad thing. I don't think we get enough
No.
encouragement in this world. But for whatever reason, they had a negative reaction to that. I have no idea why. And they said, well, this is just like, they said, I'm speaking out against the toxicity of, positive thinking because, whatever. And it's just like, they said this, it's just like, and I'm only using this for illustration purposes. I'm not going at this person. I'm just using this because it fits in the context of the conversation for
Yeah.
illustrative purposes, changing the frame. It would be just like if you, meaning me, went to John Hagee's church and stood up and started preaching about there is no hell.
Mm.
Or you deconstructed from hell because you saw it was toxic. I'm deconstructing from I can't even believe. Sometimes I'm like, do you even listen to yourself? I deconstructed from positive thinking because I saw that it was toxic.
Yeah.
Um so and didn't even answer the direct question that I had asked. Didn't even completely change the subject. But here's my point. There's no comparison between telling people that they can think positively and feel better and you're being controlled and traumatized and worried about the afterlife by the doctrine of hell. The two don't even have any relationship to each other whatsoever. It's completely apples and oranges. And so they'll change the frame. They'll either, you see what I'm saying? They may avoid the question or they'll change the frame on you. They'll make it about something else and they'll try to put it back on you. Well, this would be just like if you, and then they'll say something that's completely nonsensical, but they say it in such a way that you can become almost hypnotized, if I could use that term for a moment, like
Yeah.
not deep hypnosis, but almost like, what was that? The Jungle Book and Mowgli, right? When he looks at the snake or whatever, and the snake's
Yeah.
eyes are, if you start feeling that way, if the person can't answer a question directly, if the person can't, then, chances are pretty good you're dealing with somebody who's, at the very least, their intentions for you are not for your highest good.
Right.
Does that make sense? Did I make sense just now?
No, that's perfect sense. And that's the thing. You have to ask yourself, is what this person is saying, can I process this for my greater good?
Yep.
And if the answer is yes, then yeah, continue the conversation, consider the information, and process it. But if it's like, okay, I don't see any good for this in myself. And mind you, everybody hear me. This is highly subjective. It's highly subjective because what what is edifying or what is nourishing, what is good for me may not be good for you. And so you have to really strain this through the filter of your own understanding and your own empathy and compassion, your own understanding of self. You have to process all of this through that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, you'll just get had. I mean, and I'm going to use the street vernacular. You'll be somebody's hoe. You'll be somebody's bitch. I'm sorry, but that's really what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think we got to the root of the issue, right? Like people will weaponize anything they can to control you, to get from you what they want. And these are people who are unstable. These are people who do not get their needs for self-esteem met
Right.
from a, like I would say, crystallized way. So in other words, like if somebody can completely disagree with me on something, I don't go away thinking ever, not for 1 second, thinking I must be really stupid. I must be, oh man, I guess I'm just you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
it doesn't impact my self-esteem. Now, if somebody attacks me personally and says you're an asshole, blah 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 blah, that's a different thing.
yeah,
But just because someone disagrees with me about a topic, could be any topic. Like I'm clearly left leaning in my political orientations, and I think that our country is in a mess, and I don't have anything in common with people who, believe in the deep state and believe that in Donald Trump and all that stuff. But I've never, ever, 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 ever in my life had a political discussion where I walked away and thought, oh my God, I just, how dare they? Like, if anything, I walk away and think, I don't know how to talk to these people. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I never made it personal. And because my sense of who I am is not dependent upon the world around me. I'm
yeah,
not, um, I'm not, I'm not jealous because somebody has more followers than me, or upset because a friend of mine, um, has just wants to spend time with other people or something that instead of me or something. It's like, you see what I'm saying? It's not
yeah,
like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Oh my God, what did I do? I mean, I just don't go spiraling down in that I just don't do that. But I have, and I'm not saying I've got the greatest, there's room for growth, and I
yeah,
want to grow in that area. It's one of my goals for 2024. But to have a crystallized sense of self, and here's what I mean by that: a sense of self that is not dependent upon the reactions or responses of other people, that you're not using other people to prop up your self-esteem or prop up your self-confidence or prop up your really sense of value in who you are, or
yeah,
question your experiences or question your idea. You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
And a lot of people haven't done that. And so what you got to realize is that when you're dealing with people, and you don't know this on the surface because you can't tell, because that's that barrier that I talk
yep,
about, where a person's inward life depends on their self-disclosure, and they can lie.
yep. The
But
representative versus the authentic self.
there are people who don't have those things, Derek, and they have to use that their sense of self is completely other oriented. How this person feels about me determines how I feel about myself. What this person thinks about me or people group thinks about me determines
Yep,
what I think about myself. What they say determines what I say. What they do determines what I do.
yep,
And so, this is a person in high school that was the chameleon, that was, I'm going back, a few decades, but, they were, there was a guy that was, taking me to church, that he was a church boy in front of the church crowd, talking about how pure and holy he was. And then
mhm,
when we get around you know, the other crowd that was doing the college life, he'd get drunk and talk about what a player he was,
yeah,
and then get really nervous if the two groups ever came together. Like, he'd manage his life to try to keep those two groups completely separate so they don't talk to each other or compare notes. That's somebody who's depending on externals for their sense of self rather than depending on their own internals. And so, um, the person who is the know-it-all is depending on you thinking of them as a know-it-all in order to feel
right,
good about themselves. And so you
exactly.
just have to be aware that people will use you, not even necessarily nefariously.
Mhm,
They're just using you to self-regulate their own emotions
exactly.
or their own sense of self-esteem and things like that.
Yep. I mean, if you think about it, the person, the knowledgeable person is self-regulated. In other words,
Exactly.
they have an internal compass, right? That dictates the direction of their life, right? An internal source. The know-it-all is totally defined by external. They're defined by who listens to them, who likes them, who shares their content, whatever it is, right? And and this is the thing, like this was something that I've learned. And Aaron, this is one of the things that I love about you is that you are a person who is secure in themselves. You are happy with who Aaron is. You're secure in who Aaron is, and so you're not dependent upon popularity contests to fortify your sense of self, your own identity. And but the know-it-all is totally dependent on external stimulation, external edification, external encouragement. They have no direction in and of themselves, and that's an easy way of telling. And here's the funny thing: we talked about this during the week too, that like the know-it-all, sometimes the know-it-all has a moment, and we talked about this, the I call it the Hitler moment. And the reason why I call it the Hitler moment is because Hitler was a nobody. He was a guy toiling in obscurity. He was failed as an artist. He failed in so many categories. But he found one thing, and he found a niche. And in that niche, somebody saw him.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, this guy has something. And the people that saw this, they began to elevate it. But what happened was is that he, rather than cultivating something in himself,
Right.
he began to become dependent upon the people around him feeding his ego, feeding or responding to what he thought his knowledge was. And so when someone, a know-it-all, has that moment, it's like the Hitler moment. Now, so let me change this back, or backtrack this a little bit, because you have people like Jim Jones, right? So Jim Jones, by everybody's account, was a guy that could talk the draws off a snake, right? This guy had mad charisma,
Right.
and he
Right.
was going to influence people no matter what,
Right.
right? And but the thing that they both had in common was that one became a know-it-all based on what he was able to project, and another one became a know-it-all based on what he got from others. And it's subtle, but you have to learn both manifestations,
Mm.
because if you don't, again, there are Jim Joneses in the world, and there are Adolf Hitlers in the world, and and both of them are equally dangerous, and both of them are fed externally. But you have to learn to discern between the two, because it will be easy. It's easy to fall into the trap of the know-it-all. It's easy. It is easy, and history bears that out over and over again. So the thing is that if we are rooted and grounded in ourselves, that we determine our direction from within and not
Yep.
externally,
Yep.
then we have a defense against the know-it-all.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where I'm going to stop.
No, for sure. It's like, okay, so we come full circle. So, I started this out by saying I put that post out there because I was thinking about cults, because my friend, who's researching them, we were talking about it. Somebody messaged me, about some of this stuff. And so it's like a cult leader comes from a place of superiority, and they're going to attract their polar opposite, which is going to be those that have a sense of inferiority, that want to feel better about themselves. So
Yeah.
Carl Jung wrote a book called Modern Man in Search of a Self, something like that, or The Undiscovered Self, I think it was called. And he predicted in Germany, ironically, the rise of Adolf Hitler from a psychological perspective, because if I'm remembering my facts right, see what I did there?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. Well played, sir. Well
If
played.
I'm remembering my facts right, he but basically he talked about how when you're oppressed, when you don't have that strong sense of self, you will look for a symbol outside of yourself
Hmm.
that will make you feel powerful.
Ah. Aha.
And so the bravado, the superiority, You're looking for that, but you can't find it within yourself. So you're going to gravitate towards a leader who projects a sense of superiority. You wouldn't dare question them.
Mm, mm,
And then you'll invest your identity, albeit in this case, your national identity, your political affiliation, your anger and rage, scapegoating at where you're at,
mm,
into this sort of savior figure who
mm.
is strong and powerful and sticking it to the libs. Oh, wait, that wasn't Adolf Hitler.
This is close. You're in the ballpark.
I did that on purpose. So again, it comes back to, if I have a good, solid sense of self, that doesn't mean I don't get rattled. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean, but you know, that I always feel great about myself. But it does mean that I don't take shit from people, and I don't put other people in the driver's seat of my life, and
Mm,
I never allow someone else to be the expert about me. I'm the expert on myself.
yes.
Now, I may be a horse-drawn carriage, and somebody else out there might be a Lamborghini, but I'm still the expert on the horse-drawn carriage. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not going to let the Lamborghini manufacturer tell me how to change a wagon.
Mm, yep.
And so I think that's the answer to a lot of it. So Joe Machuda put out here, he said, I'm going to testify I've been a know-it-all, and it was directly related to my having my understanding of a spiritual and religious doctrine. Not sure exactly what that relationship is. Then he says that was the only time it was really because I was insecure about what I was hearing in the spirit. So good way to like affirm and resonate with how insecurity breeds these kinds of things. And keep that in mind too when you're dealing with people. The bigger the mouth, sometimes the bigger the hole inside.
Yeah.
The higher the ego, the lower the sense. And by ego, that's a bad term. The higher the projection of a glamorous self, sometimes
Mm,
the lower the sense of self-worth that the person has. But specifically in regards to spiritual stuff, like we're all insecure about it. That's the dirty little secret, because again, it's not like going to a wine tasting party. We're dealing with questions that philosophers and humanity has wrestled with since the dawn of time. And anybody that cannot acknowledge that thinks that they have the special revelation, they have the direct line. Marty McFly spirituality. I've been to the future and I've seen it and I know what it's supposed to look like and I'm the voice to get it there. Then, that's a real problem. Like with my own spiritual stuff, if I'm in a vacuum and I'm the only one saying what I'm hearing, I'm keeping my mouth shut.
yeah.
Because dude, I live in fucking Pueblo West. My church, never got into the thousands, and I got a few thousand followers. I don't care if I had 1 million followers on YouTube. I don't care if I had 1 million followers on YouTube. If I'm influencing 1 million people compared to 8 billion, that's like me having $1 million compared to all the money in the world.
Right.
It means nothing.
Yep.
So how in the world can I think that I'm the anointed one, the chosen one to bring truth to the world? I mean, it's crazy, man. It's absolutely delusional and deranged that people end up going there. So in light of the discussion that's hit pop culture, at least in some circles, on cults and that kind of stuff, listen, just 3 rules for life, man. Don't be dumb, don't be in a cult, and don't be an ass, and you'll be fine.
But I'm trying to get that.
I guess what? Oh, I didn't finish. So we all feel insecure about that. We all need validation. We all need, people to help us process some of that stuff. That's just normal part of the process. And I'm not insinuating that Joe Machuda thinks of himself that way, because he doesn't.
He said, "Don't be dumb. Don't be in a cult." And what was the third?
Don't be dumb. Don't be in a cult. And don't be an ass. And life will go pretty good.
Okay, I'm just putting that out there so everybody sees it. Rules for life. Yeah, that's a good title for a book, man.
I could probably write that book. Don't be dumb. Don't be an occult, and don't be an ass.
But, this is the thing that I want to say about this is that you know don't for everybody that's watching, don't think so highly of yourself that you think that you have all the answers. I know I don't. And let me tell you something. I say this as a person who is intelligent and knows that they are intelligent because it's been documented. you know, I had a Mensa card at one time, so it's not like so I understand that, but I also understand that that no matter how much I know or how much I think I know, the more I learn, the more I learn that I don't know,
Exactly.
and so I've learned that learning is self edifying. It's self gratifying. That it's something that continues. I mean, it's essential to growth, and so the other thing that you have to look at is that people who are not committed to growth, you could probably say with some certainty that you found a know it all.
Yeah.
But this has been excellent, man. I've grown in real time on a lot of
I have
levels
too.
here.
I have too. Absolutely, 100%. I think it was, and I think we need. I think we need to talk about this kind of stuff because it doesn't get talked about, but it's real. This is real life stuff, man.
Yeah, it
This
really
is real life
is.
stuff. And let me say this. Let's finish with this, Derek. I'll
Okay.
give my 2 cents, and then I want you to give yours, and then we can be done, unless you need to go.
Not
Um, how do you deal once you realize you have a know-it-all in your life? How do you relate to them? And I would answer the question by saying, give up on the delusion in your head that they're going to listen to you, understand you, or that you're going to persuade them in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
Just end the conversation.
Yep.
Like, there is no point in arguing with someone who has already made up their mind. Don't confuse them with the facts.
You know, I talked about morticians earlier,
Mhm.
and I have several really good friends who happen to be in that profession, and they will tell you that you cannot argue with a dead man.
Yeah, there you go.
And once you've
Save your breath.
seen that someone is galvanized in their thinking,
Yep.
they're dead intellectually. Rigor mortis has set in. And at that point, there's no further discussion because you can't discuss anything with a dead man.
Yeah, it's fruitless. There's no life.
Yep,
It's
exactly.
it's pointless. So you're wasting your time beating
Yep.
your head against a brick wall. Just move on. Relate to them on other levels if you can. But
I don't even when I find a know-it-all, I
mhm.
just compartmentalize them,
Yeah,
and I don't really relate to them. I deal with them when they pop up like whack-a-mole, you
yeah.
know.
There you go.
But I don't relate to them. I mean, when I'm playing whack-a-mole, I'm not having a discussion with the moles that pop up. I'm just hitting them in the head to, you know.
Yep. Yep.
That's me.
Yeah. All right. Good discussion.
Good stuff, man. This has been really, really, really good. And I hope that everybody that's watching, hey, if you're watching, we'd love to hear your comments. Put your
Yeah.
comments in the chat.
Yes.
Aaron and I, we look at all of these things, and we really want to know what you think about this. How have you dealt with the know-it-alls in your life?
Yep.
So, Aaron, go ahead and land the plane, man.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. If you're watching by replay, we appreciate you. I hope this was helpful and beneficial. I like this program, podcast, video, whatever you want to call it, because I do think that we get into really practical topics that and we discuss them in a way that I just don't hear discussed. That doesn't mean there aren't other people doing it. I'm sure there is. I don't want to be a know-it-all. But we do love and appreciate your feedback. And so with that, Derrick, thank you, man. This really was beneficial and helpful for me, and made me think about some things in a different way,
Yeah,
which is
thank
always
you, man.
good. And I just appreciate you, man.
Likewise, likewise. Love you, man.
All
Uh,
right. Peace and hair grease. We're out.
all right. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk, folks. Have a great weekend.